Okay. Well, welcome everyone. This is a compact settlement cross-cutting group for the update to the climate action plan. Liz from the Climate Action Office. And these cross-cutting groups, if folks haven't attended yet, are intended to help work on these issues that are not just in one subcommittee, but really cut across all of them. And we have representatives from, I think we should have representatives from all three drafting subcommittees to help steer these recommendations moving forward. In our previous meetings, we've been looking at strategy level recommendations, and then in the interim between our last meeting and this meeting, there was a request for some pre-work to get us focused in on some final revisions and recommendations as we move that forward to the Climate Council. So we'll start by just kind of looking at our agenda here for today. So again, we're going to spend the bulk of our time really reviewing any last revisions for these pathway strategies and actions. We'll spend some time in the beginning. We talked about the scope of compact settlement. Do we want to broaden it out to land use? Do we want to keep a compact settlement? Just kind of like the title and scope of what this is going to be moving forward, and any suggestions. And then we'll be identifying three priorities to lift up to the Climate Council that I'll present on December 16th. And these are for that presentation to lift up a top three. That doesn't mean that the other pathways go away. These are the three priorities. There is a prioritization process, and other subcommittees and some cross-cutting groups are working through that. That's for any new recommendations. So if there's existing recommendations, they don't need to go through that process because they've already been through that prioritization process through the last climate action plan. But for this time around, it's only new ones. We'll have time for public comment, and then we'll wrap up with next steps. Any questions, comments on the agenda before we dive in? Okay, great. So I'll share my screen to show the template, and I'll also throw it in the chat for those who are editing to it. Okay, so folks should be able to see my template here. I also put it in the chat. So in case anyone's new to this process, I'll just kind of do a quick refresh. We have our pathways and strategies and actions. We have an area for recommendations, whether to revise, keep as is, or move. We have an area for revised language. We have notes, and then this is kind of the new columns for that prioritization process that I talked about for any new recommendations moving forward. So if folks remember from the last meeting, I asked everyone to take some time and make any revisions heading into this next meeting. I don't think I saw any, but I did just highlight, for the purposes of our time today, if this sounds good to everyone, I did highlight no action taken, more information needed, actions just for this group's time to focus on if they'd like to make any decisions around revising or removing or keeping as is, since we did look at strategies last time around and we do have limited time together today. Does that sound like a good plan to everyone? Or any concerns on that direction?
I think that sounds great, Liz.
Okay, thanks. All right, so all right, so let's start off with number 7 here. I'll give folks just a minute to read that. And any comments, whether it be I'd like to revise this, I'd like to keep it as is. But yeah, I'll give folks just a moment here.
Hey Liz, real quick, could you just
Yep.
scroll up super briefly so I can see what the category headings
Yes.
are again? And then,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you. Yeah. So all of these actions below will fall under the strategy and pathway.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. So I'll scroll back. And
Okay.
this is yeah. So let's do this.
I do wish that Bronwyn was here, so that she
Yeah.
could speak to this. So I mean, I think this is not my area of expertise, but I'll just get the conversation started. I think that it's not a bad idea. I think that maybe I would like to know why there was no action taken. So maybe we can follow up with those that are responsible for that program. Probably Bronwyn would be able to speak to that. Um, and maybe we could revise it to say something like in coordination with other funding programs that do elevations and floodproofing, like FEMA funded programs with HMGP or BRIC, so with VEM. So I think that there probably would be some benefit to coordinating with other programs that do that work.
Okay. So revision to include some coordination language.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that there's a lot of talk about coordinating different funding programs, making sure that we're not, duplicating benefits or, uh, clashing in our funding program. So it could be part of that type of work there.
So maybe something like strengthen coordination with existing programs.
Yeah, I think that would
Okay.
probably touch on it. So you could say such as VEM or specifically VEM because I don't know anyone else who does it.
Okay. Make a note. And you think Bronwyn would be a good person to ping about this?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Um, that sounds good. And anyone else? And Katie's from Vermont Natural Resources Council. We had corresponded earlier. Katie, I'll encourage you, like, we're such a small group. If you have any comments, you could feel free to share before public comment and you could introduce yourself briefly as well if that's helpful to the group.
Sure. Thanks, Liz. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Gallagher. I direct the Sustainable Communities Program with VNRC. So, um, very much this is in my wheelhouse of work. I don't have any specific comments on this action, but I'm happy to chime in if helpful. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we'll move to the next one, which again still falls under this pathway and strategy up here. Which we looks like we did revise, so we can move on from that one. So we'll move down to line 10 then, make village centers permanently eligible for the downtown transportation fund that builds infrastructure needed to increase walking, biking, and transit.
That looks good to me. We recommend that a variety of state and federal funding programs be directed to downtown and village areas, but we would defer to you all if there are specific ones. I mean, the point that cross-sector is trying to make, and transportation cross-sector folk, is that we don't want to be subsidizing sprawl. We want state and federal dollars to be spent in designated growth centers. So this kind of gets at that, but it's talking about a specific program, which if you all experts think that's the right program, and should we be more specific? You know, whatever you come up with. Does that make sense?
I think maybe we should reach out to Andrea Wright on this one.
Okay.
And the only thing that I would potentially add with my planning commission hat on would be to possibly increase the technical assistance at the same time to the municipalities to access the funding.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
I would agree with that, since I helped our planning commission get one of those grants, and it wasn't easy for a small rural town to do.
No, yeah.
The problem.
It's really
real
confusing.
problem.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have a basic question, Liz. Maybe I'm getting ahead of it. Who's going to reconcile the language? So we have, in transportation, we have some recommendations around smart growth, and there's some recommendations that are going to come out here, and they're similar but different.
Yeah.
Eventually, someone's got to go in and reconcile that language, and that'll just be pushed off into the future. So we don't have to worry about that right now. If words are different.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like, it's definitely like, this is not the only case where this is happening in terms of just there being a lot of overlay between subcommittees and committees. I think it's going to definitely be a discussion point for the council to, after looking at everything in totality, right, figuring out like where are things ultimately going to live, and then also like, yeah, like what's the language that we're going to talk about it in.
I hope there's
we're part of the plan last time, and I fully expect it to be part of the plan this time. So making sure that when we put something in, everyone's on the same page about what do we mean. Yeah. And then, sorry, Caroline, just to go back, I just want to make sure I don't miss that point you made
so
about.
I'm not going to worry about that.
Yeah, I wouldn't right now. Just because, yeah, it's kind of happening across the board. I think, it's helpful to just be as specific as we can, I think, in these actions, because that will help the council, and if they're wondering like what we mean when we say these terms, like, or even for me to put in the notes, like, this is what we mean. That way there's like kind of less like having to backtrack later. But I think in the meantime, it's fine if we're all kind of, this work is happening across different groups, and we're saying similar yet, different things. Okay, so Caroline, you said something about suggesting something about adding technical, what was it? Capacity for municipalities, was that?
Yeah, to at the same time increase technical assistance, which maybe is more in the community capacity realm, but I think that to make it successful, that kind of has to go hand in hand, is that increasing the accessibility and providing the technical assistance that small communities would need to access this funding.
Would that, the need to access funding? So that's part of the eligibility, or not?
I think you don't have to delete eligibility. I'm just saying that I think that it has to go hand in hand, because we can create more funding programs, but if the small towns don't know how to access it, can't keep them all straight, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to be successful. So just wanted to add in that technical assistance component.
Okay. How does that look? So, or something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
would like to know what others think. Like maybe we want to be more specific that, and I know there's a lot of non-state entities here, so you might have a different view. But when I think about it, I think about, the state providing that technical assistance, but maybe it's about increasing capacity for other organizations to help them. But I think it's important to say that it's the state increasing the state's capacity to provide that assistance to municipalities.
Well, that's what the regional planning commissions do, so.
Yeah,
It
but
seems like
the state has to
but they're
fund them.
limited in what they
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But it's rare that the state would come into a community to assist them in applying for a grant, but the staff at the regional planning commission do that all the time. So but they're limited in what they can do. So the increasing capacity of the regional planning commission to provide the necessary technical assistance.
I believe that the current eligibility for village centers, maybe somebody else knows this, is that the village centers that are eligible have gone through a Better Connections grant program, which is a fairly hands-on with technical assistance. I could be wrong about that, but I'm curious.
No, you're right, Katie. So I was hanging here in the background because I felt bad for being late and walking in on a conversation that I felt like I really should have been here for.
No, we were waiting for you, Bronwyn. Yeah.
I'm here. Yeah, Katie is correct. So in order to be eligible for the downtown transportation fund, I mean, in the majority of cases, you're a downtown, you're a designated downtown. Villages can apply and do the Better Connections program, which does give them a leg up in the downtown transportation fund, but it's the way the scoring and the preferences is that those downtown transportation funds typically go to downtowns. With that said, that's all kind of up in the air now because we are with the Act 181 and the designation program reform, we are restructuring how those benefits can happen, but I think the preference is still to say Better Connections first to set you up for downtown transportation fund. Certainly, yes, I think folks would say, generally speaking, more assistance for doing those planning activities at the local level to set them up for implementation funds is needed. So I don't know, I don't want to throw this whole recommendation up in the air, but yeah, it seems like maybe what we're saying is just more capacity for being able to do transportation planning projects, even in small villages that set them up for implementation funds.
Why are we just picking that program? I'll give you another example. I'm involved with a recreational trails program grant, and priority is given to downtown and village areas, and that should continue. As one example, there's a lot of other state programs, and shouldn't the state, as a matter of policy, and I thought this was in effect, any agencies that's granting for land use improvements should be directing the money to downtown and village centers. I'm afraid that if we mention one program, then another program won't feel like they have to continue in the future as money gets tight.
We could, something that we've been doing, I just came from another cross-cutting group, and something that we did was kind of like, if we make a statement from kind of what you were saying before, but like increase the capacity to make our village centers more, something like that, but then through supporting fund or strengthening funds or establishing funds such as, and then including that, but not limiting it to that one program. That could be kind of a way to name it, but also leaving the door open for others that would support the action that we're trying to get through.
Am I incorrect in believing that there's a state policy that money has to go to downtown village centers, Bronwyn? Or is that just sort of?
No, it's fund specific. It's not statewide, certainly.
Okay,
There's a lot
so
of state funds that would make sense to. So, right, so,
wastewater
and that's
funding.
wastewater funding, transportation funding, things where the state's funding around development where it makes sense for those investments to be in our smart growth areas, but certainly not statewide. But so defining, what is the world of state investments that really do make more sense for them to be to prioritize designated areas. I don't know that we can list those out in a short recommendation. I think it would be fair to say increase funding and capacity for multimodal transportation in smart growth areas. We're not limiting it to then this one program, and we're not blowing it up too big, but it's, I think certainly something that's going to keep coming up in terms of, like this is where I wish Andrea was here. We all just like say our little bit of expertise and then pop over to the next person. But like the like transportation demand models, right? Like we're planning for a lot of growth in these towns. What can we do transportation system wise that helps ensure that we're not at the same time creating a traffic problem because there's more cars now in these downtown areas, right? And that requires that multimodal infrastructure. So that makes sense. We can just focus on more planning and funding for multimodal infrastructure in downtown areas and designated areas.
Is there another one that deals with wastewater and water supply?
So
Because that's where we want to direct those monies to downtown village areas. That's as important as transportation in making sure growth occurs there. I was involved in the 90s and writing a rule for A&R that required SRF, state revolving loan fund monies, to go to downtown village centers, and that rule was adopted. I think it's still in existence. This is a long time ago. But
that be covered?
Maybe that needs to be reiterated.
Yeah, would that be covered in row 8?
Maybe.
Yeah, and it looks like that we had worked on that revision either last time or the meeting before. Yeah.
Okay. So that's covered. That doesn't
Yeah,
need to be in a generalized state investment in downtown and village centers. We'll specifically talk about that. Okay.
What did folks think about line 10 with the revisions now?
Do we want the second sentence to be first and be like, such as making village
Oh,
centers
yeah.
permanently?
Yes, thank you.
I would say increase technical, or maybe just increase capacity for multimodal transportation planning and implementation, because I think it's really important to remember that the planning's got to come first. Yeah.
Okay, great. If there's nothing else on that one, we'll move on to the next. Line 14 and 15. I'll give folks a moment to maybe read both. And then this is under a different strategy, so make sure you can see it.
Sorry, which one are you looking at?
We're looking at 14 first and then 15 under 20. It's just under a different strategy, so I just want to let folks know under 25B.
Liz, can you scroll down a bit so I can see the full
Yes.
15?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there somewhere else that talks about, or am I missing where the statewide land use planning policy and implementation plan language originates?
Um,
I'm sorry, I don't want to
um,
take us
It-
off this, but it feels like it's starting somewhere that,
Well, cross-sector, that last time around, we talked about this in cross-sector. Yeah, I just wonder how relevant is this now that with the changes to Act 250 and the planning associated with that? Is that going to affect this idea? I mean, it's been talked about for at least 30 years. And is it still, it's obviously you can't have silos in government if you're going to do smart growth. You have to come together somewhere. Will any of that be helped through the planning? I don't understand all that well related to Act 250, the reforms to Act 250. I leave it to you guys, Bronwyn, and the rest of you know so much more about it than I do.
My personal feeling is
Maybe
that,
maybe that's not relevant to this idea.
no, I think it very much is. And my personal sense is that Act 181 is certain, has yet to be implemented. There's still a lot of moving pieces, a lot of decisions to be made, but the act is in place. There's implementation moving forward with the RPCs doing consistent future land use mapping, working with DEC, Rivers, all the A&R folks, and then the Land Use Review Board, which will be in place at the new year, I think. And so I feel like a lot of this is happening through that. And if it were up
Right.
to me, I would say, let's take a pause on this and see what comes out of that. And maybe in the next climate action update, if there's something else that is kind of going off the rails, that would be the time to bring it back up. But for me, I would say, let's pause on this and see Act 181 implemented.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also feel like 14 and 15 kind of read as somewhat duplicative to me, like creating a state planning office and then creating another office of strategic investment and coordination that also has, related to land use and planning. So I feel like I don't think I agree with Bronwyn that we should probably take a pause on both of them, but I don't think both of them need to be, I don't think it even needs to be two separate actions. But also, yeah, I would agree that I think we need to see where Act 181 goes and let the land use review board form and see how that's going to play out.
so keep as is.
Cross-sector's recommendations on smart growth as they exist right now recognize what we heard from planners, regional and planners within VTrans, that 181 is a huge opportunity to strengthen planning, and that we need to watch that and make sure that that's in service to smart growth, those efforts. So we were, as it stands right now, that's one of our recommendations around this issue. Just, throwing that out there for you guys. We're not going to change what we have right now based on this work. It'll have to get resolved in the next iteration, correct? Like tomorrow we have to present, and I got to say that the growth centers and smart growth is not going to rise to the top of our recommendations when we know there are other strategies that are going to have known emissions reductions around electrification, for example. So we're going to have it in there. I don't know where it's going after cross-sector meets tomorrow. And at some point, all this work we're putting into this has got to go somewhere and relate back to alternative modes, which we have to, we assume we're going to be in the plan, but we right now don't have the information to show us that it will have emissions reductions based on the carbon reduction strategy that VTrans undertook a couple of years ago. It just doesn't pay off now or in the next several years. But the public has said on it over and over and over again, they want it. They want more transit. They want more bike ped. They want the intercity rail. So we have to nod to it, but we don't have evidence that it's going to make a difference. We do have evidence on the smart growth study that smart growth can reduce emissions by 2050 by, I can't remember, I think it's 15%. So that's good. So we'll keep smart growth. I don't know. Depends on what the council wants to do.
Well, I
Just
hope
throwing
that
that out
council
there as
does see that
background.
that
What'd you say?
the smart growth study had forecasts that accounted for different mode splits. And so, yeah, at a bare minimum, smart growth keeps our trend line going in the correct direction. And it only improves if we are doing smart growth plus multimodal
investment.
Right. So
it's just the CRS said, you know, the money it was going to take to get to the emissions reductions in both bike ped and in transit, it's billions of dollars. You know, it's unthinkable that the state would be able to pony that up, or either federal government for that matter, to have the number of buses that we need running around and the lanes of bike path and et cetera, to make a dent in emissions. So it's going to be up to the council to figure it out.
Okay, so just to circle back. So we'll keep this as is. I mean, Callie, you did mention potentially combining them, but would you all like to wait to see what happens prior to making any combining of these two?
I think they're both important because one is about planning and the other one's about investment and directing where the funding goes. So if you combine them together, there's two functions there. It's not just about land use planning, it's about investment. And the way I read that, it looks like it's one does plans, the other directs funds for wastewater or whatever it is.
Okay. Okay, so we could leave these keep as is now? For now?
I would for now.
Okay, all right. Okay. Let's see what's next is 18. I'll give folks a moment there. And sorry, what was the act called? Yeah.
On those last two, so they're fine to, I think they're fine to stay as is, but I think what we're saying is in terms of the planning policy or a state framework, whatever that, like, okay, that is Act 181. And the other recommendations are the ones that are important for helping to make sure Act 181 is implemented. So investment for multimodal infrastructure, for planning and multimodal infrastructure, and investment for water, wastewater, right? Like those are the dollars that go into development that is shaped by 181. Right. And that is smart growth, right? Act 181 is in theory the smart growth thing. And then it's the dollars to help actually make that development happen in that way that is outlined by Act 181. So those can stay, probably not going to rise to the top as a priority because it's just sort of like keep doing Act 181. But the thing that's maybe a higher priority is making sure that the dollar investments to make 181 happen and actually see development happen in that way is where there's priority for us to elevate to the Climate Council.
And is that reflected?
Can you put that in a couple of sentences?
Yeah.
That seems really important.
Yes. Is this being recorded? Because I could just go back and No, I
It
can.
is recorded. It is recorded.
But I think if it was set up in this format with these, rows of actions, I would say the action is keep implementing 181. And then those other actions that we had already discussed, which is the investment in multimodal transportation, both planning and implementation, and wastewater. If this needs, and I don't know, I admit that I'm struggling to follow all of our tasks, but if at some point this needs like prose, like a one paragraph on what's most important coming out of compact settlement for the Climate Commission to pay attention to and support, then yeah, that would be the paragraph that I just said, which is the overall kind of place where we're at right now with compact settlement is we've got this one covered. The whole planning framework is covered in 181, maybe not exactly how it was envisioned here, but that's Act 181. And now the goal is keep investing and keep making those investments in those compact settlements per Act 181. But I can try and put that in there.
Something like that. I just threw something in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Does that seem, Gina, like it holds the place that you want it to hold?
Yeah, I mean, we're much simpler minded in cross sector. We're saying implement 181. And number 2, invest in downtown food centers.
Yeah.
I mean, that works for me. I think consistency is helpful, right? Like if they see the same
Yeah, I mean, it just
message, the same wording and the same, that's probably good.
That's all we're saying.
And so that would be a new action under the strategy.
That thing I sent you a couple months ago has that there.
Mm.
Oh, it's changed a little bit, but not much.
And that's being implemented. Then is what we're saying. We're implementing
Well,
it.
tomorrow it's in our VMT reduction recommendations. We'll see where it goes. Cross sectors meeting tomorrow to hash out our priorities. We're only going to lift up 3, and smart growth is not going to be one of the 3 we can lift up because there's just other things that have more bang for the buck at this point.
Okay. So,
but yeah,
folks are,
I mean, I don't want to prejudge, but that seems like we're headed. That's where we're headed.
okay, that sounds good. Brown, what were you saying?
I was just going to say that yes, Act 181 is in the process of going into implementation. And so again, like what's the message to the Climate Commission? Like, I feel like the way sometimes we handle this is if it's being implemented, it's not prioritized. But I would advocate to say, no, it's very important to say, yes, it is being implemented, but it is definitely something that is key to our climate strategy. We need to stay on top of it. So keep following the Act 181 implementation, and in support of Act 181 implementation, keep funding for multimodal transportation, planning and implementation, and wastewater planning and implementation. Because those are the things that really are needed to make Act 181 impactful in the long run.
So should I put that language in rather than compact settlement, just to be more specific? Increase investment in.
No, I would just
Okay.
say continue to implement Act 181, and then we have those 2 other actions somewhere in here that talk about funding and implementation for but again, just to say that like as we're prioritizing, I think I have a real issue, and sorry, I just came out of a meeting, so I feel very hyped up. I feel like I'm speaking very quickly and forcefully, so my apologies. But when we are prioritizing these actions, to me, they go together, right? Like you can't have one without the other. Like we can't just have Act 181 and no priority of funding for those other multimodal, So for me, these 3 things go together. They don't have to be separate actions, but just to say, when we are going to the prioritization part of what gets sent up to the Climate Commission, it then becomes harder to like take these things apart because they go together.
That's helpful to know. Because something.
I'm putting in the chat what's in the cross sector part right now. The first action should have a number. There's actually 4. So the strategy is to promote smart growth, concentrate mixed use, blah, blah, blah. And then the actions are implement Act 181, state, regional, and local planning regarding tier 2 and 3 designations and the support of smart growth through Act 250. Prioritize state and federal funding, work across state agencies. And then we want to look at VMT implications of the dispersion of job centers and consolidation of education. So we're seeing these, and you guys haven't talked about this at all. There are these straight policies and programs that are dispersing development, and VTrans should work to better understand the VMT implications of school consolidation, healthcare changes, those kinds of things. You guys, maybe this is that is actually number 4. That's really specific to cross-sector. Maybe you guys don't want to go there, but that's what we have. This is what we're pushing forward, these 4.
Gina, could I ask why tier 1 is not included in the?
You know what? There were some state experts who put that in, and I just like, okay, those guys, you know, and we can mess with that for sure. I forget who it was. There are a couple of people at VTrans who actually worked in regional planning commissions and know something about it, and that this is what they suggested. I don't know enough about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to say.
Well, it's tier 1 is the one that would be most related to compact settlement.
Oh, okay, so
you know.
maybe there's a typo in there and that needs to happen. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to do that right now.
I would just reference Act 181. Don't reference the tiers. Just
Okay, and just say implement Act 181, state, regional, and local planning, and the support of smart growth through Act 250 or something. Okay, forget talking about tiers.
Okay, so it's 12:45, which was our public comment time. Just want to acknowledge that we only have one member of the public on the call, so Katie, you've been able to talk throughout. But just acknowledging that's why we're not having more public comment time. There is one more highlighted of no action taken that I'd like for us all to look at before we go to talking about what we're lifting up to the council and next steps. So that is right here, line 19, and that's under the same strategy of 25B. So I'll just give folks a moment to look at that.
That's a big action. So I mean, first, I know that we use the word blight in different places, partially because federal funding programs, but do we have to use that word? My urban planning hat tells me that we shouldn't be using the word blight because it has a lot of association with removing affordable housing and putting people in skyscraper apartment buildings. So I think it'd be good to maybe change that language. I think it sounds great, but I don't know if it's feasible.
Are there suggestions? We could totally change that word. Are there any suggestions of what we replace it with?
I would
Or how
almost
you
just
word
say
this?
just take blight out and just say address vacancy in brownfields, improve.
Okay, thanks.
Just make it simple. Just remove
Yep.
it.
There was a study required last year related to land banking. I'm not sure the status of that,
Mm.
but that might be relevant here.
So I hesitate speaking because I know that everyone here pretty much knows way more about this than I do. But I wonder if this is very tightly connected to the creation of a state level planning office. And maybe not exactly what's being addressed by Act 181, but talking about the coordination of state programs that are addressing resilience and climate change adaptation, compact settlement, land use policy. If there was a way that we could be a little bit more general in addressing the coordination of programs to address our housing and resilience needs.
Any additional thoughts on that? I'm not yet familiar with this.
I don't feel like I know enough to speak on this, other than to say for me, land bank study feels like before saying anything about this, I should read that. And then the other piece of this is the work that's being done to identify other capacity building models across the state as well. Because I mean, if I think there are existing sort of there are entities that provide that same function already. They're just kind of scattered in the places where there's capacity for that. But if the question is, how do we provide that for the areas that don't have capacity to have their own entity that does that work, then that gets back to the capacity question, which there's some work going on in that space through the Leahy Institute to figure out how to increase rural capacity. I don't know that it's come up. I don't know that it's been discussed in terms of providing capacity to do land banking, but certainly that would be like one of the many things that we've been talking about in terms of what do communities need the capacity to be able to do. Yeah, just as I don't have a way to edit this to make it more actionable or connected to other work without more time to think about it and going back and looking at that land study that Katie just mentioned.
Maybe could it be altered to talk about connecting our existing funding programs, things like our buyout program or brownfields programs, with ensuring that there's new, safer development happening within communities? Is that kind of what it's trying to get at? So when I think about land banks, I think about like land trusts, different conservation programs. I think about buyouts and the fact that they have to be undeveloped in perpetuity. I think that some of that is happening, but then it's not being well connected to replacing the housing needs in safer locations. Like that is a gap.
I just added a sentence up there. At the top. Do we want to keep that? Remove it?
It's hard to work on actions that like you didn't originally come up with, and I'm not sure exactly
Yeah.
what their intent was.
Yeah, that's fair. We could leave it as is for now, and if folks want to revisit it, I'm gonna be sending up a follow-up email, and folks could send any suggestions, like maybe after doing more reading on it if they want to. But if not, we could leave it as is, if that sounds good. So being that we have 5 minutes left, there's obviously a lot we didn't get to. I highlighted what our focus was on today, which was the no action taken or needing more information, being that we already looked at the strategy level at our last meeting. So moving forward, I will be sending a follow-up email. What we have been doing with other cross-cutting groups is that I am going to be presenting for all the cross-cutting 3 top priorities from these cross-cutting groups to the council on December 16th, the same date that subcommittees are presenting their priorities. So I will send a follow-up email with the sheet. I'm going to put the advancing or completed to keep as is. That being said, if anyone has suggestions after if they want to go through this, you can comment on it, and do it that way. But because we just were limited on time, we did focus our attention on the no action taken actions as a priority. So in that email, I'll send the template, and I'll ask for folks to send what they believe should be the 3 action level items lifted up to the council in that December 16th meeting. And then that would be, then from that point on, this work will move to the council level. Does that sound like a good plan moving forward? Does anyone have questions or comments or concerns on that?
I feel, there are concerns because we couldn't go through all the actions together, but we'll try to make it work.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm going to give everyone the opportunity to review the actions when I send that Excel template. And if folks want to make revisions or edits, they can. I'll just send another update saying folks made some edits and suggestions. So I guess the ask would be, I'll ask people to let me know if you're going to be making any revisions or edits to things that we haven't discussed as a group, just so that everyone's on the same page. But if not, then just to send me your top 3 actions, looking at all of the actions in totality. And knowing that this group spent the time together working on the strategy level and the no actions yet taken actions. But at least that way, like, because also like Ag and Eco wasn't here this meeting, and so I want to give them the opportunity as well to, if there's any revisions, I'll give folks like another round, just like, it won't be as a group doing it at the same time, but at least collectively, like, take another look, and I'll send this out again, kind of thing. Does that sound good?
Yeah, just let me know what you need from me. Given workload right now, it is hard for me to work outside the meetings. But just let me know.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Liz. Bye.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good one. Bye.